Belarus has been a bosom buddy of Russia's for a very long time. The two countries are so close that it was Belarus that Vladimir Putin called upon to serve as a springboard for his special military operation in Ukraine, thanks in large part to Belarus bordering the country that Putin wants to take. So, Belarus has always been dangerous, but something is different now. A once dangerous nation is becoming absolutely lethal, and NATO has to do something about it. Why? Russian missiles are arriving on NATO's borders, and there's something very dark brewing in a country that seems more than happy to follow Russia's lead. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which reported on August 20 that Russia is in the process of sending its terrifying hypersonic Oreshnik missiles into Belarus. Beyond those missiles, the country is also going to receive advanced reconnaissance and air defense systems. And that's not all. The same outlet says that Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko is warning his country's citizens that they need to prepare for a war that he says is inevitable. New brigades are being formed, groundwork is being laid, and with Lukashenko now appearing on television to tell his people that a fight is coming, it's becoming ever clearer that Belarus is now on a war footing. Frankly, this has been coming for a while. On the Oreshnik front, Russia certainly hasn't been shy about its intention to station these missiles in Belarus so they can serve as a threat to Ukraine and NATO. Back in June, Reuters published a piece in which it reported that Russia was ramping up the production of its new hypersonic missile. Putin confirmed it, stating, "Serial production of the latest Oreshnik medium-range missile system is underway, and that the Oreshnik has already proven itself very well in combat conditions," when speaking to a graduating class of military cadets. The same outlet reported that Putin claimed in 2024 that Belarus could end up being the home for many of these new missiles. True to his word, August 1st brought with it confirmation from CNN that the Oreshnik has officially entered service and that the missiles will be going to Belarus. Preparatory work was ongoing, Russia's leader said, and that work would likely be done by 2025, setting the stage for an influx of these lethal missiles into the closest ally Russia has, proximity-wise, to Western Europe. And now, if Euromaidan Press is to be believed, those missiles are already arriving, or at least Belarus is preparing for them to arrive. Oreshnik missiles arriving in Belarus would be a dark enough threat to NATO alone. However, it's what Belarus is doing both to prepare for those missiles and to get itself ready for a fight that is the darkest part of this story. Take the creation of a new brigade that seems to be dedicated to the Oreshnik, for example. On August 6, the new Voice of Ukraine reported that Belarus is in the process of creating a new air assault brigade that will serve as part of the country's special operations forces. That brigade will be stationed almost on the border with Ukraine, and it just so happens to be a surface-to-air missile or SAM regiment. The creation of this new brigade isn't speculation. Belarusian Special Forces commander Vadim Denisenko has already confirmed it, stating, "A decision has been made to reinforce the southern sector. Today, this is the most, so to speak, restless direction, keeping all of us on alert. Therefore, it was decided to create a separate air assault brigade there." The brigade, he adds, is already 70% ready, and it will be good to go by the end of 2025. So, there are hypersonic missiles and a brigade that is custom designed to use those missiles arriving in Belarus. But surely there must be some legal safeguards in place that prevent Lukashenko from taking his country to war as soon as Putin snaps his fingers, right? There were, but not anymore. At around the same time as Denisenko was announcing the creation of Belarus's new SAM brigade, a lot was going on behind the scenes with Belarusian lawmakers. August saw the country's lower house of parliament receive a set of draft law amendments from the Belarus Ministry of Defense entitled "On Amendments to Laws on Ensuring Military Security and Defense." That draft may as well have been named "Changing Belarusian Law so we can fight when Putin orders it," as every proposed amendment seems designed to make it easier for Belarus to go to war. Among the amendments is a new legal framework that gives the Ministry of Defense the ability to announce a mobilization at a moment's notice. According to the Lansing Institute, passing this law would mean any act of aggression against the Union state will be grounds for Belarus to go to war. Pay attention to the fact that the term used here is Union State and not Belarus. The Union State refers to both Belarus and Russia as what is essentially a cooperative force and for all intents and purposes one country, albeit with Belarus having its own increasingly puppet president. What this amendment says is that any strike against either Belarus or Russia means that Belarus can mobilize and even impose martial law on its citizens. Now, think about which nation is launching deep strike after deep strike against Russia right now. A huge part of Ukraine's strategy in 2025 has been to weaken the Russian effort through drone attacks deep into Russian territory. Under the new amendments to Belarusian law, any one of those strikes could serve as grounds for Belarus to enter the Ukraine war, whether it's inside Belarus or Russia. That's terrifying. And it's an amendment that applies to NATO just as much as it does Ukraine. Plus, the term Union State is malleable enough that any nation with which Belarus or Russia wants to ally can be included within it. Belarus is setting the stage for entering a war, even when no act of aggression has been committed against it directly. The same amendment proposals also suggest a shift in Belarus's official military posture. Before, the country claimed to be in a state of defensive neutrality. That's always been a lie given the role Belarus played in enabling Putin's invasion of Ukraine, though it's accurate in the sense that Belarusian troops aren't involved in that invasion. Now, the posture is focused on achieving strategic integration with Russia's military doctrine, the Lansing Institute reports. In other words, whatever Russia does militarily, Belarus will follow. The one saving grace is that these amendments are still sitting with the Belarusian Houses of Parliament, meaning that they haven't become law yet. But it's only a matter of time until they pass. Belarus is hardly the most democratic of nations. As the BBC noted in a profile on the country that was last updated in January, Lukashenko is essentially a dictator. Alexander Lukashenko, often referred to as Europe's last dictator, has repeatedly been re-elected as leader in contests that opposition candidates and foreign observers have labelled as unfair and undemocratic, the outlet says. It points out that Lukashenko has been Belarus's president since 1994 and that he won his 7th consecutive presidential campaign in January of this year. Jail, exile or death await Lukashenko's opposition as he doesn't permit dissent in Belarus. Knowing all of that, does it seem like the Belarusian parliament will refuse to pass a set of legal amendments that come from Lukashenko's Ministry of Defense? Of course not. These amendments are laws in all but name right now, and they'll all become official very soon. Other signs that Belarus is getting ready for a fight include the Zapad 2025 military drills, which are scheduled for September and will be held between Belarus and Russia. These drills have a bit of a history, as Euromaidan Press reports. Previous Zapad exercises were used to disguise preparations for real operations, most notably in 2021, which set the stage for Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine 1 month later. Reports already showed troop redeployments to training areas that could double as staging grounds, the outlet notes. This isn't to say that Zapad 2025 is definitely a staging exercise, but it has been in the past. It likely will be again, and NATO needs to be paying very close attention to what happens during these supposed drills. And it is at least doing that. On August 5, the Kyiv Independent reported that Germany has deployed 5 Eurofighter Typhoon fighter jets to an airbase in Warsaw, Poland, specifically to serve as a deterrent to the Zapad 2025 drills. The outlet says that the latest iteration of the drills is expected to include around 13,000 soldiers, and NATO is determined to send a message that it's ready for anything. Beyond the Typhoons, Germany has also sent 150 soldiers to Poland to beef up its border forces on the off chance that Zapad 2025 morphs into something more serious than a military exercise. Now, earlier in the video, it was said that something dark was brewing in Belarus, and closer look at the Oreshnik missiles that are heading into the country right now showcases just how dark the situation is getting. Only a few bits and pieces are known about Russia's new hypersonic missile, and most of that information is being drip-fed to the West as Russia delights in turning up the intimidation factor that comes hand in hand with the term hypersonic. Starting with its speed, Russia is claiming that the Oreshnik is capable of reaching up to Mach 10, which is 10 times the speed of sound, once it's begun its descent back to Earth after being launched into low orbit. For context, that amounts to 7,610 miles per hour, which is so fast that practically no operational air defenses can do anything to counteract the missile. Much of what else is known is speculative or gleaned from the small pieces of information that Russia has provided about its new missile. For instance, the BBC reports that a Russian military expert named Ilya Kramnik told the newspaper Izvestia, which the BBC says is a pro-Kremlin outlet, several of the Oreshnik's likely specifications. It's likely that we're dealing with a new generation of Russian intermediate-range missiles with a range of 1,550 to 1,860 miles and potentially extending to 3,100 miles but not intercontinental, he reportedly said. So, the Oreshnik can't travel as far as an Iskander. However, it's much faster and its range is still high enough to make the hypersonic missile a threat to Ukraine and several European NATO allies. The Associated Press also notes that the missile is believed to be capable of carrying 6 warheads, each of which contain submunitions, making it incredibly difficult to intercept even when taking the speed factor out of the equation. Kramnik adds, it's obviously equipped with a separating warhead with individual guidance units. This is a very advanced missile, far too advanced for Belarus to have built it, which only goes to further the idea that Belarus is now acting as a puppet state for Putin. Other commentators, such as military analyst Vladislav Shurigin, speculate that the missile could be capable of working as a bunker buster, even if it isn't equipped with a nuclear warhead, the BBC reports. Speaking of nuclear capability, it seems likely that the Oreshnik is capable of holding nuclear warheads, and that it's proven itself accurate enough to be used in a future nuclear strike. Hold on a second. Proven itself? Yes, this weapon that seems like it was pulled straight out of science fiction has already been used at least once before. On November 2022, Russia announced the first use of the Oreshnik in a devastating strike against Ukraine's Dnipro region a day before. That announcement was accompanied by a few seconds of grainy black and white footage that seemed to show the missiles touching down on their targets. That footage shows the missiles blazing through the skies before they touch down, suggesting that Russia may not be exaggerating about the Oreshnik's speed, even if it's leaving the world to speculate about the missile's other capabilities. What happened in Dnipro wasn't a test. It was a warning, one that Putin delivered to Ukraine and the collective West that screamed from the rooftops that Russia's new missile works and it was ready to deploy. It's been all quiet on the Oreshnik front since that Dnipro strike. As Russia has already said, it's in the process of moving into mass production. Still, these missiles are en route to Belarus, along with a whole host of other issues that are emerging within a country that Putin practically controls at this point. And there are several reasons why NATO needs to be concerned about these dark developments. The first of these reasons is simple. Hypersonic missiles are a problem. A huge problem. Neither NATO nor Ukraine has any type of air defense system that's capable of countering Russia's new hypersonic missile. The UK's Royal Air Force made that clear in a defense research paper penned by Wing Commander Matthew Smith. Though Smith says that the emergence of hypersonic missiles won't upset the balance of military power between Russia and NATO, they are a threat that needs a counter. Presently, NATO does not possess the capability to intercept hypersonic missiles, although systems such as the US Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD) may offer a foundation on which to develop such a capability, Smith writes. So THAAD is about the best the West can do on the defensive end. And it isn't enough. In May 2023, Air Force General Glenn D. Van Herk testified to the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, where he reiterated the problems that hypersonic missiles pose. Hypersonic weapons are extremely difficult to detect and counter given the weapon's speed and maneuverability, low flight paths, and unpredictable trajectories. Van Herk told the committee, "I believe the greatest risk for the United States stems from our inability to change at the pace required by the changing strategic environment." In other words, NATO doesn't know how to counter Oreshnik missiles yet, and that makes Belarus a massive threat now that these missiles are stationed in its territory. The Oreshnik can easily fly far enough to hit any target in Ukraine from Belarus. It's also more than capable of reaching the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, which many commentators believe will be Putin's next focus if he wins the war in Ukraine. In fact, practically every country in Europe is now at risk. According to Distance from 2, the distance between France and Belarus is 1,250 miles as the crow flies. That's well within the range that Ilya Kramnik suggested, and it means that Belarus has just become a nuclear threat to all of European NATO. Now, beyond the missile's capabilities, it's also hard to ignore the fact that the alliance between Russia and Belarus is growing tighter than ever. The changes to Belarusian legal frameworks that essentially allow the country's leadership to mobilize if Russia is attacked are proof of that. As far back as September 2023, the Council on Foreign Relations said that the relationship between Belarus and Russia was essentially creating an axis of autocracy in Eastern Europe. The Council pointed to the role Belarus played as a staging ground and springboard for the Ukraine invasion, along with Putin's long-held desire to unify Russia with Belarus as evidence of this axis. The legal framework changes discussed so far only pull the two countries closer together. That's what Putin wants, because he knows speculation is rampant that an attack by Russia on NATO is coming, and that much of that speculation is already pointing to Belarus as the source. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said as much in February during the Munich Security Conference. Russia is preparing 15 divisions. Around 100 to 150,000 troops are being trained to aggravate the situation on the Belarus direction, Zelensky told the conference, according to Euronews. I'm not sure if they will attack Ukraine, but they will attack. Maybe Ukraine, maybe Poland, maybe the Baltic countries. In June, the Belarusian opposition leader, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, spoke to Euronews to suggest that Lukashenko may want to allow Russia to use Belarus to attack the Baltic states, but the people of Belarus won't allow it. They might be forced, but it doesn't mean that they will fight there. I hope that people will prefer to escape or change sides, but not fight with the Lithuanians or Poles, especially knowing how much these countries are supporting us, she said. They'll certainly be forced. Legal framework amendments are ensuring that. Whether Tsikhanouskaya is accurate about her countrymen refusing to fight, even if force, remains to be seen. It's easy for people to claim they won't fight for something in which they don't believe, but when punishments are waiting for those who refuse, perhaps up to and including death, it becomes a lot harder to say no. Even an army of the unwilling can be used as cannon fodder by Putin, and he'll still have the threat of Oreshnik missiles to back that army up if he does take the fight to NATO. But perhaps most worrying of all, and the key reason why NATO needs to be concerned about the dark developments in Belarus, is that the arrival of Oreshnik missiles in Belarus creates several new invasion opportunities. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which points out that the upcoming changes to Belarusian military law could spell very bad news for Ukraine and NATO. Two scenarios could play out when those laws pass, the outlet says. The first is that two avenues for an invasion by Belarusian forces into Ukraine open up. A northern front invasion would see Belarus attempt a direct push into Ukraine's west, perhaps with the goal of severing Ukraine's land connections to Poland and other NATO nations. That would mean no more Western weapons would come from those routes, making Ukraine vulnerable. A secondary offensive could also take place against the highway to Chernihiv, which Putin attempted and failed to take during the first year of his invasion. Belarus could help them, cutting another vital logistic artery in the process. The second scenario, and the one in which Oreshnik missiles are most likely to come into play, is that Russia might choose to assault the Suwalki Gap. This narrow corridor of land that separates Belarus from the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad is a problem because of its difficult position near Poland and the Baltic states. If Russia can claim the Suwalki Gap via Belarus, it connects Kaliningrad to the Russian mainland, creating a logistical pipeline that would support an invasion of any of the Baltic states. NATO's eastern flank would be split in two, and that division could be enough for the combined forces of Russia and Belarus to take territory before NATO can do anything about it. That's a situation that NATO cannot allow to happen, which is why it's imperative that the collective defense group does something about the hypersonic missile problem and everything else that's happening in Belarus. What that something ends up being remains to be seen, but NATO can't allow the trouble that's simmering in Belarus right now to boil over when the futures of Ukraine, the Baltic states, and perhaps even NATO itself lie in the balance. Now, Poland certainly isn't ignoring what's happening with Belarus and Russia right now. Tensions are rising, and something dark is happening at the Russian-Polish border at this very moment. To find out what, check out our video, and if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the latest developments in Belarus.